Today we will recap the movie called Candy Corn, 2019. The movie starts with four friends sitting at Cooper's cafe. They are talking about Halloween and planning what to do. Mike says this year will be awesome and they want to scare a boy named Carol. A girl named Carol tries to stop them. She tells them they're not kids anymore. But they don't listen and keep planning. Carol leaves. When the boys go to pay, Gus, the guy at the counter, asks about their Halloween plans. They say they have a big plan. Gus wants to join and offers them free stuff in return. The friends agree if he can get them free things. Next, a boy named Jacob Atkins is introduced. He's quiet and shy, and he's being picked on by a guy named Mike and his friends. Jacob eats candy corn while looking at an empty screen. Then, he rides his bike to work. Mike and his friends are at a strange show, waiting for Jacob. Carol is there too, because her boyfriend Steve asked her to come. Jacob reaches work and meets the owner, Lester. Lester is kind to Jacob and tells him he's now part of their group, like family. Lester goes on stage to start the show. Outside, Mark and the other bullies corner Jacob. Steve grabs Jacob and insults him. Jacob shoves Steve away and pushes Mike when he arrives. The bullies attack Jacob, hitting and kicking him a lot until he stops moving. Later that evening, Lester finds Jacob's lifeless body outside, covered in blood. After that, Mike and his friends talk nervously. They're trying to make themselves feel better about what they did. They say it was actually Jacob who started the fight, so they had a right to hit him back. Carol can't believe what she's hearing. She gets upset, shouts at them, and leaves. Back at the trailer, Lester is still shocked. He looks at Jacob's bloody face and motionless body. He gets angry and goes to an old dusty box. Inside, he finds a mask, a candle, and a book. He takes them out. Lester puts the mask on Jacob and reads from the book while holding the candle. He's trying to use some old words to bring Jacob back to life. But his plan doesn't work. He puts the book down in disappointment. Suddenly, he sees Jacob and is shocked. The scene changes to a sheriff named Brantford driving around the neighborhood. He gets a call from the police station. Someone complained a few times about something. He tells them he's been watching but hasn't seen anything strange yet. All of a sudden, the sheriff sees a man with blood on him standing by a tree and looking at him. The sheriff gets out of his car to check, but when he gets closer, the man seems to disappear. Then, he gets a call from Marcy at the police station. She tells him to come back urgently because there's a problem. The sheriff goes to his office and finds Carol waiting there. Marcy encourages Carol to tell the sheriff what she told her. Carol is scared and doesn't want to talk about last night, especially because Mike is the sheriff's son. The sheriff calms Carol down and asks her to explain. Carol says they might have hurt a boy the previous night. The sheriff listens and says it's unlikely because no one has reported a death. He thinks there was a fight, but nobody was killed. Carol is scared and asks him not to tell anyone. The sheriff decides to check her story and goes to the trailer park to talk to Lester. Lester is still very angry and doesn't like cops because they show up after something bad happens and don't do much to stop it. He tells the sheriff that his boss was badly beaten by a group of boys last night, but he's okay now and resting. Brantford talks to Marcy on the radio and says that Jacob is okay. He decides to go to Jacob's house to check on him. When he knocks, no one answers, which seems a bit odd. As Brantford gets back in his car to leave, he feels like someone might be watching him. Next, we see Carol coming out of the shower. She gets a call from someone who doesn't say their name. The person tells her they know what she did, and then the call ends suddenly. Steve shows up at her window wearing a mask and scares her. Carol tells him she doesn't find it funny, and she's still really upset about what happened. Steve says sorry and tells her that Jacob is okay. Carol feels relieved and thanks God. She and Steve make up by kissing. Later, Mike talks to Carol. He tells her he's upset about what she did. Carol is confused because she's not sure what he means. Mike says he knows she told on them, and he insults her. He warns her to stay quiet from now on. Carol is fed up with his behavior, so she pushes him aside and leaves. Next, Gus goes to Cooper's place and talks to his brother Chet about the previous night. They chat a bit about what Gus did. Gus needs to use the restroom and goes in. When he comes out of the stall, he finds a pumpkin filled with candy corn near the sink. He eats a few without knowing someone else is in the restroom. Suddenly, he sees a man with a mask beside him. He thinks it's Jacob and gets scared. Gus panics and explains that he wasn't part of the bad stuff the night before, he was just there. But the man doesn't listen. He grabs Gus by the throat and brutally stabs him to death against the wall. After that, Carol goes to see Steve. She tells him about how Mike has been acting threateningly. Steve explains that Mike is just really mad about what's been happening lately, but he'll probably calm down soon. While they're talking, a boy comes up to them and tells them that Gus was murdered. Then, Brantford and other police officers show up where Gus was killed. They find his body all over the floor. Branford notices a candy corn next to Gus and picks it up. He goes outside, leaving another officer to take pictures of the scene. Outside, he goes to Chet, who is crying and looks really shocked. Branford says Chet will have to come to the police station to give a report and share any helpful information for their investigation. At the same time, Steve and Carol go to the Coopers' place. Branford asks them if they know anything about what happened and why someone would kill Gus. They all go to the police station. There, Steve and Carol tell Branford that Gus was there the night when the boys threatened and hurt Jacob. Branford doesn't really think there's a connection and explains that Gus was involved in a lot of shady things that might have led to his death. Deciding to investigate more, Branford brings police officer Fox along and they return to the trailer park for more information. While in the car, Fox is scared. He tells Branford that he's never seen such a horrible death before. He's really frightened and worried about who could have done it. Branford calms Fox down and assures him they'll figure out what happened. Mike and his friends decide to meet up and talk about what happened. They start getting scared. Mike doesn't believe Jacob could do this, but Steve says they can't be sure. They wonder if it wasn't Jacob, then who could it be? They agree they all need to be careful, but Mike disagrees. He thinks they're worrying for no reason and angrily leaves. Carol and Steve also go away. This leaves Bobby alone. He's very anxious and sits there thinking about who might be responsible. He hears a strange sound from another room in the house. When he goes to check, he finds a pumpkin on the floor in the hallway. He thinks his friends are playing a prank. As he goes near the pumpkin, Jacob suddenly appears. Using just his hands, Jacob pushes Bobby against the wall and pulls out his spine, killing him instantly. Branford and Fox go to the trailer and talk with Lester. They ask him if he knows anything about Gus's murder. Lester wonders if they're suggesting he's involved. Branford explains they're just gathering information and asks if Lester knows anything useful. Inside, Lester says he found Jacob outside and sent him home, so he doesn't know where Jacob is now. While they're talking, police officer Conrad arrives to tell them about another murder. Branford looks at Lester, realizing he likely isn't involved, and goes away. Lester's friend asks him what he did with Jacob's body when he brought him into the trailer that night. Lester doesn't answer and goes back inside. The police officers go to Bobby's house to look at the crime scene. What they see makes them feel really sick. They find Bobby's body on the floor, and his insides have been torn out. Fox gets so sick that he goes outside. Conrad comes in and tells Branford that a neighbor heard Bobby's screams and called the police station. That's how they found out about the murder. Branford tells Conrad not to spread the news and goes back to the police station. There, he tells Marcy that he might have been wrong about who the killer is. He takes his gun and tells Marcy to announce that everyone has to stay inside their houses after dark. He also tells Conrad not to let anyone in or out of town until they've handled the situation. Then, Branford leaves Fox at the station with Marcy. Branford goes home and questions Mike about that night. Mike is unsure and doesn't really answer. Branford says things are serious now and tells Mike not to leave the house and to lock the doors. He asks Mike to tell his friends the same. Later, Steve and Carol are kissing when the phone rings. Mike tells them about his dad's instructions. Steve mentions the Halloween party being cancelled, but Carol doesn't mind. They continue kissing. The news spreads in town, and many people call the police station, worried about what's happening. They're told not to panic and to stay indoors like the sheriff said. The police go to Jacob's house. Since he doesn't open the door, they break in and search around. Upstairs, they find a bad smell. They look under the bed and find a decaying body. Meanwhile, Carol and Steve go to a theater to have fun and ignore the advice to stay inside. Carol tells Steve she needs the bathroom and will be back soon. At the same time, Lester goes outside and sees his friend sitting in a circle, looking really worried. Gate asks him to tell the truth about Jacob and what happened that night. Lester says they won't understand, but he's proud of his actions. He's not ashamed of what he does to counteract evil. He shouts that he'll never die and is here to keep balance in the world. When Carol comes back from the bathroom, she sees a pumpkin on the stairs with candy popcorn. She calls for Steve, thinking he's playing a prank. Steve finally comes back and as he approaches, he falls down. Carol rushes to him and sees blood coming from his head. He's dying. She looks around and sees Jacob coming toward her, terrified and crying. She gets up and runs in fear. Jacob catches her, grabs her tongue, and pulls it out. Blood comes from her mouth, and she dies right there. Jacob picks up her body and places it near Steve, then he falls to the floor. Next, Lester is with Jacob, trying to wake him up. Lester begs him to get up, saying that their work isn't finished. On the way back from Jacob's house, Fox asks Branford if he thinks Jacob killed his mother, referring to the dead body they found earlier. Branford says he doesn't know, and the details are unclear right now. When Fox brings it up again, Branford gets frustrated and tells him to be quiet. On the way to the police station, they see Steve's car outside the theater. They decide to check inside and find the dead bodies of Steve and Carol. Branford calls Mike and explains what happened, warning him to be very cautious. Angry and upset, Mike drives straight to the trailer to confront Lester. He shouts for Lester to come out, and Gaydon tells Lester that Mike is there. But Lester's men keep Mike busy because Jacob needs blood to wake up and he's not ready yet. They surround Mike, knock him out, and tie him to a chair. Meanwhile, Branford gets home and finds Lester there. He aims a gun at Lester and threatens to shoot if he doesn't say where his son is. One of Lester's men hits Branford from behind with a metal bar. Lester takes out a knife, and Gate tells him he's going too far. Lester looks scary and starts using the knife. Mike is taken outside by Lester's men, still dizzy from the earlier hit. He sees lights and a Ferris wheel. He hears Lester's voice declaring the start of the show. In the distance, a cop car approaches. Mike thinks he's saved, but he's horrified when he sees his father's head on the car's hood. His father's eyes are gouged out and his nose is chopped off. Mike is in shock and breaks down. Suddenly, Jacob appears, tears off Mike's arms, and kicks him down. Lester comes out of his trailer, laughing and holding candy popcorn. He nods at Jacob and goes back inside. Jacob then pulls out Mike's teeth one by one while Mike screams. The scene changes to another carnival in the future. A woman asks Lester if the teeth on the necklace in his shop are real. Lester says everything in his shop has a story, and the teeth are real. As long as evil people harm the innocent, he'll be there to restore balance. Jacob is seen eating candy corn casually, and the movie ends.